Hello, travelers and monster catchers abound. I'm Stella Ferris, and you've crash landed on the Monster Catchers Journal podcast. And I hope you like today's episode about a glyph called Frost Hoot and how I caught him. So, without further ado, let's get into my story. Thank you for listening. The first sign that something was wrong in the northern pass wasn't the cold. It was the silence. Snow usually carries sound strangely, but this was different. No wind through the pines, no distant crackling noises or of ice. Just a vast, breathless quiet, like the world itself was holding still. That's when I saw him. Frost Hoot. Perched high on a frost-bent cedar was a snow-white owl, feathers so pale they blended seamlessly with the falling snow. His eyes were a piercing glacial blue, glowing faintly like moonlight reflected on ice. When he turned his head toward me, the temperature dropped instantly, frost crawling across the ground in delicate crystalline patterns. This was no ordinary owl. This was Frost Hoot. Frost Hoot didn't attack immediately. Instead, he tested me. With a slow, deliberate flap of his wings, he triggered his first ability, Snowmore. The snowfall thickened unnaturally, swirling tighter and heavier around him, while his own body seemed to sharpen and steady. His feathers fluffed and hardened with ice, his presence growing stronger as the storm fed him. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and every step I took felt slower, heavier, as if the snow itself was resisting me. When I moved closer, the mountain answered his call. With a deafening crack, Frost Hoot unleashed avalanche. The slope above us gave way, a roaring wall of snow and ice crashing downward. I barely escaped, diving behind a frozen outcrop as the world turned white and thunderous. Frost Hoot glided effortlessly above the chaos, completely in control, his wings carving clean paths through the storm, while the train reshaped itself at his command. Realizing brute force wouldn't work, I stayed still, lowering my tools and steadying my breath. Frost Hoot circled once, twice, then the air froze solid. His final ability, Ice Age. Spreading outward in a massive wave, trees crystallized mid-sway. The ground locked into ancient permafrost. And the lingering avalanche debris, frozen into jagged monuments of ice, it felt less like an attack and more like a declaration. This was his domain, untouched by time. But something changed then. Frost Hoot landed a short distance away, talons crunching softly against frozen stone, his head tilted, eyes studying me not as prey but as a choice. I offered warmth, just a small heat crystal from the sanctuary glowing faintly in my hands. The contrast against the cold was enough. He stepped closer. The storm calmed. The snowfall lightened, and in that quiet moment, Frost Hoot allowed me to get just a little bit closer. And with that, I placed my glyph and pressed the button to activate it. The beautiful spiraled light spiraled up the glyph and out, pulling in Frost Hoot. I thought I had caught him, but the mistake was thinking the calm meant acceptance. For a while, Frost Hoot remained still within my sealed glyphid. The frost patterns along the binding pulsed slowly. Like a sleeping heartbeat, snow continued to fall in the pass, but it no longer felt intentional. I let myself believe the capture had taken hold, that the bond had formed cleanly. That was on me. Frost Hoot doesn't submit, he endures. The first fracture came quietly. A thin crack formed along the glyphid's spine, no wider than a hair, but cold poured from it like breath from a corpse. The temperature dropped so fast, my lungs burned when I inhaled. The ground beneath my boots froze solid, ice racing outward in sharp branching veins. My glyphid began to shake, not violently, but rhythmically, as if something inside was beating against the seal in measured intervals. Frost Hoot was counting. The crack widened, feathers pure white, edged with white ancient frost, pushed through the seam, followed by a pulse of energy so intense it knocked me backward into the snow. The seal shattered with a sound like breaking glaciers, and Frost Hoot erupted into the open sky in a spiral of snow and ice. The storm returned immediately. Snow more activated again, but stronger this time. The snowfall thickened until the air itself felt solid. Frost Hoot grew larger within the storm. His wingspan stretched unnaturally wide as layers of ice reinforced his feathers. Every flap of his wings strengthened him further. This wasn't just a stat increase, it was adaptation. The longer the storm lasted, the less touchable he became. I tried to move, but Ice Age followed almost instantly. The wave rolled outward from Frost Hoot like a frozen horizon, swallowing everything in its path. Trees frozen mid-fall, rocks split apart as ice expanded within them. The snow beneath me hardened into ancient permafrost, locking my legs in place up to the knee. It felt like time itself had slowed, thickened, trapped inside ice. My breath fogged, and then crystallized in front of my face. Frost Hoot hovered above, eyes glowing brighter than before. He wasn't angry, he was correcting an imbalance. Avalanche came next, not from above, but from all directions. The mountains responded to his presence like loyal sentinels. Entire ridges collapsed inward, snow roaring like an ocean as it surged forward. The center of the pass, I tore myself free from the ice, just as the ground disappeared beneath me, diving downslope while debris thundered past. I lost sight of him. That was worse. The storm swallowed sound, direction, scale. Snow pressed against my eyes until everything blurred into white. Frost Hoot could be anywhere, above, behind, within the storm itself. Every instinct screamed that this was no longer a capture attempt. This was survival inside a living winter. Then I heard the hoot. It echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once, low and resonant, vibrating through bones and instead of air. The snow shifted violently beneath my feet as Frost Hoot descended, talons striking the ground hard enough to fracture ice. In a wide radius, Ice Age surged again, overlapping itself, reinforcing the freeze until movement felt impossible. I dropped my equipment, not as surrender, but as acknowledgement. Frost Hoot stepped closer, each movement deliberate. Snow more intensified, the storm drawing inward toward him, feeding his core. His presence distorted the snowfall, pulling flakes into snow orbits around his body. This was his true form, not a monster to be caught, but a force to be negotiated with. I remembered then, though, why the glyphits in the glyphs, and even the glyph gun, existed at all. It isn't a cage, it's a promise. I pressed my hand into the snow, letting the cold bite until my fingers went numb, and grounded myself fully in the storm. I didn't reach for my glyphit again. I reached outward. I opened the seal of one of the glyphits, not as a capture, but as a sanctuary invitation. The storm resisted. Frost Hoot rose again, wings beating once, twice, and the mountain groaned under the strain. Avalanche threatened to collapse the entire pass, not out of malice, but necessity. If the balance could not be restored, Frost Hoot would reset the land entirely. I spoke his name, not loudly, not commandingly, not just enough. The hoot that followed cracked the ice beneath us, but the storm hesitated. Snow more faltered for the first time. Its endless feed interrupted. Frost Hoot landed again, closer now, eyes narrowing as if truly seeing me for the first time. I offered no tools, no seal, only the sanctuary itself. High roosts where snow could gather without destruction, endless winter skies unchanged, a place where Ice Age would not erase life but preserve it. The storm did not stop immediately. Frost Hoot took to the sky one final time, circling the pass as Ice Age receded slowly, releasing the land from its ancient grip. Avalanche debris settled instead of surging, snow more faded into the natural snowfall, light and quiet. When Frost Hoot returned, he did not enter the glyphit per se. He brushed against it. The seal reformed, not cracked, not forced, but altered. Frost curled along its edges like etching rather than binding. Frost Hoot remained free but connected, not captured, bound by choice. The past thawed just enough for life to continue, and Frost Hoot vanished into the storm, a white shadow against a gray sky. I know he watches from the sanctuary now, roosting where snow gathers thickest, waiting for not for commands, for balance. Now it was time for the hardest part. I had to tell Professor Orion about how I endangered my best friends again and went after this glyph that was way too strong for us. So, I didn't go back to the sanctuary right away. The cold followed me for miles, not the violent kind. Frost Hoot commands, but the quiet, watchful chill that settles in your bones when you've made a decision you can't undo. Snow crunched under my boots long after the storm had faded behind me, and Frost Hoot stayed distant, a pale shape drifting high above the clouds, close enough to remind me he was still there, far enough to remind me he was never truly contained. Zena and Luna were waiting when I crossed the threshold. They didn't yell. That was worse. Luna's arms were crossed tight against her chest, Ignazura's sapphire eyes glowing dimly at her side. The ruby stripes along his body flickered like restrained fire. Zena stood a little forward, protective without meaning to be. Myrno shifted anxiously behind her legs. They'd felt it, the storm, the surge, the fracture in the bond, and they'd known exactly who caused it. Before either of them could speak, the air changed. Orion arrived the way he always does, when he's furious, without announcement, without ceremony. One moment the sanctuary hummed with its usual layered energy, and the next it was like gravity itself had recalibrated around him. His boots echoed sharply against the stone floor, each step measured, controlled, and far too calm. He didn't look at Frost Hoot's glyphid. He didn't look at the damage reports scrolling across the sanctuary's display. He looked at me. "You left," he said, low voice tight. No notice. No coordinates. No backup. I opened my mouth. He didn't let me speak. "You triggered a class winter entity," Orion continued. His eyes flickered briefly to Zena and Luna before snapping back to me, sharper than ice. "You let it break containment, and you did all this without telling me you were even going." "That wasn't," I started. "You put Zena and Luna in danger," he snapped, "and that was it." And that was it. That was where the restraint broke. Again! The word echoed in the chamber like a strike. Zena stiffened. Luna's jaw clenched, her hands curling into fists. Could feel the weight of it then. Not just Orion's anger, but the fear underneath it. Buried so deep he'd probably deny it exists if I said it out loud. "I didn't bring them with me," I said finally. "They weren't there." "That doesn't matter," Orion shot back. "When you destabilize a sanctuary bond, when you provoke something on Frost Hoot's scale, it ripples. You don't get to decide who's there and who isn't." He turned, gesturing sharply to the frozen scorch marks still faintly visible along the sanctuary walls, remnants of Ice Age bleeding through the bond. "This place is connected," he said. "They are connected to you, and you didn't tell me." Silence fell heavy after that. Luna was the first to break it. "We felt him," she said quietly. "The storm, it was wrong." Zena nodded. "It scared Myrno. The sanctuary hasn't done that in a long time." Orion closed his eyes for just a second, dragging a hand down his face. When he looked back at me, the anger was still there. But now it was layered with something raw. "You don't get to keep doing this alone," he said. "You don't get to decide that your instincts outweigh everyone else's safety." "I wasn't trying to be reckless," I said. "Frost Hoot wasn't meant to be contained. I'd forced it." "If you'd told me," Orion cut in. "We could have planned. We could have prepared Zena and Luna. We could have reinforced the sanctuary before you ever stepped foot into that pass." His voice rose despite himself. "Instead, I had to fill the sanctuary's destabilization and hope that you hadn't just got yourself killed or dragged something back that would tear this place apart." That hit harder than the yelling. I looked down at the glyphit in my hand. Frost curled gently along its edges now, calm, patient, and watching. "I was afraid you'd stop me," I admitted. Orion laughed once, sharp and humorous. "No, I would have gone with you." That stopped me cold. "I'm not angry because you failed," he said, stepping closer now, lowering his voice. "I'm angry because you didn't trust me enough to let me help." The room felt too small after that. Zena moved first, placing a hand lightly on Orion's arm. "We're still here," she said. "Nothing happened to us." Orion nodded, but he didn't look at her. "That's not the point." Luna finally met my eyes. "You don't get to scare us like that," she said, not accusing, just honest. I swallowed. "I'm sorry." The word felt inadequate. It was. But it was all I had. Orion exhaled slowly, tension bleeding out of his shoulders in increments. "Next time," he said, "you tell me where you're going, even if you think I'll say no." "There won't be a next time like that," I said. "There always is," he replied, "but next time you won't face it alone." Frost Hoot let out a distant hoot, then faint but unmistakable, echoing through the upper chambers of the sanctuary. Orion stiffened, eyes narrowing upward. "That thing better understand boundaries," he muttered. I almost smiled. Almost. So, in the next minute, after Orion had started to walk away, a fight broke out between Orabeak and Frost Hoot. Orabeak's bed sat high in the eastern alcove of the sanctuary, woven from sun-warmed reeds, polished stone, and fragments of old glyph casings that still hummed faintly with residual energy. It glowed softly at all hours of the night, reflecting the natural aura Orabeak gave off, a steady, golden warmth that made the space feel alive. Orabeak himself rested there often, a compact but sturdy golden scarab beetle with a smooth iridescent shell and a broad dug-like beak that clicked softly when he was content. He'd claimed that alcove long before Frost Hoot ever brushed the sanctuary skies. Frost Hoot did not care about that history. The temperature dropped the moment Frost Hoot landed near the alcove, frost spreading like spilled ink across the stone floor. Snow gathered unnaturally indoors, flakes drifting downward despite the sealed ceiling. Frost Hoot's wings folded slowly as his talons touched down beside Orabeak's bed, his glacier eyes reflecting the warm gold beneath him with clear disapproval. Orabeak lifted his head. The glow around his shell brightened. That should have been my warning. I mean, that's the only time Orabeak ever does that, is when he's angry and when he's trying to protect his bed. Frost Hoot hooted once, low, territorial, and snow more activated instinctively. The snowfall thickened, strengthening Frost Hoot's presence as the cold pushed outward. The golden light of the bed dimmed under the encroaching frost, its warmth struggling against the sudden winter. Orabeak responded without hesitation. He surged upward, wings buzzing violently as radiant energy flared from the seams of his shell. The air shimmered as warmth and light pushed back the cold, melting the snowflakes mid-fall into harmless mist. He landed squarely between Frost Hoot and the bed, lowering his head, duck-like beak pointed forward in a clear challenge. The clash was immediately. Frost Hoot swept his wings wide, unleashing avalanche, not at the sanctuary itself, but inward. Snow and ice formed instantly around the walls, collapsing toward the alcove in a controlled burst. Orabeak dug his legs into the stone, golden energy flaring as he absorbed the impact, his shell ringing like struck metal. The sanctuary shook. Ice Age followed, Frost Hoot's power rolling outward in a freezing wave meant to lock the space into stillness. Stone whitened, the air hardened, even the glow of the bed began to crystallize. Orabeak screamed a sharp, buzzing cry and releasing a burst of radiant force that cracked the ice apart. Heat rippled through the chamber, forcing Ice Age to fracture instead of settle. Frost and gold collide violently, steam exploding outward as opposing forces fought for dominance. Frost Hoot took to the air, circling snow, more feeding him steadily. Each pass strengthened him. Feathers sharpening with layered ice, he dove, talons aimed not at Orabeak but at the bed. That was the mistake. Orabeak launched upward with shocking speed, ramming Frost Hoot midair. The impact sent both monsters crashing to the far wall, ice and light detonating outward. Orabeak clung to Frost Hoot's chest briefly, golden energy flaring as his beak snapped inches from the Frost Hoot's face, a warning, not a kill. The room went still. Frost Hoot hovered, wings beating slowly now, storm faltering. Orabeak dropped back to his bed, standing over it protectively, shell glowing brighter than before. They still stared at each other, not enemies, territories overlapping. I stepped between them before the sanctuary could tear itself apart. The glyph pulsed in my hand, not to capture, but to stabilize. Frost Hoot's storm softened, Snowmore easing into a gentle indoor snowfall that melted before touching the ground. Orabeak's glow dimmed to a steady watchful warmth. The bed remained where it was. Frost Hoot finally turned away, retreating upward towards the high roost where snow naturally gathered, claiming height instead of heat. Orabeak settled back down, curling slightly atop his golden nest, eyes never leaving Frost Hoot's silhouette until it vanished into shadow. The sanctuary healed itself slowly after that. No victor was declared, but a line was drawn. Winter would rule the skies, Orabeak would rule the warmth. And I made a note in my journal that night. Never underestimate what a monster is willing to fight for when it believes something is home. And there you have it. There is our story for this week. May Zelthar shine his beautiful light down on you. Thank you for listening.